Do me a favor, blink once for me. In the time it takes you to squeeze the trigger and blink your eyes, this cylindrical piece of metal has already discharged around, extracted it, and slammed a new one in, all while containing a 55,000 PSI explosion. If you don't understand the violent microscopic physics happening inside of here, you guys aren't alone. It was confusing for me too, but after looking into it, the BCG really has 8 simple jobs that it's responsible for every time you pull the trigger. Let's look into each one of those jobs to get an understanding of how the BCG works. Step number 1 is you pull the trigger. And before you guys go in the comments and start dunking on me, this is a demo firearm right here. Everything has been cleared and is safe, and we don't use any actual ammo in here. All we're using is some simple dummy rounds or snap caps. So going back to it, once you pull the trigger, the hammer hits the firing pin to discharge a chambered round inside the barrel's chamber. The firing pin fits through the bolt tail and the cam pin, which we'll discuss a little bit later on, and barely protrudes from the bolt face when struck by the hammer. That little protrusion is what strikes the primer on the cartridge, igniting the powder, and that roughly 55,000 PSI explosion is what sends that bullet down the barrel. If you want to learn more about what happens to the bullet inside the barrel, then you can check out Josh's whole episode on barrel rifling right over here. Moving on to step number deuce. To understand this step, we'll need to understand a little bit about fluid dynamics and take a trip through some of the other parts of the AR-15 before we end up back home at the BCG. To help us out, I have a couple of visual aids here, including a cutaway upper and lower receiver here, and then I also have a cutaway BCG for us, and then some nice graphics from our famous video friend, Matt Rittman. If you want to go see how the entire cycle of operations works, go check out that video. I think it has like 20 million views or something like that. So if you're one of the few that hasn't seen it, please go check that out. As the bullet flies down the barrel, it's followed by expanding gases, which are tapped by a little hole in the barrel that leads up to the gas block. What the gas block does is redirect the gases through the gas tube that leads all the way back to the BCG. Gases from the gas tube are sent back to the gas key on the BCG right here. Now we're back at home base, our BCG. The gas key is fastened to the top of the bolt carrier. You can see it right here. The gas key is getting gas from your tube into the BCG. The gas travels down the chamber into a chamber that's inside of the bolt carrier. Here's the thing, the bolt carrier isn't just one monolithic piece, it's several different parts, which we'll keep going through as we continue to talk about the 8 jobs that this thing has. But the carrier is what contains the chamber that the expanding gases are sent to. The gas expands in this area here, driving the bolt forward to unlock the bolt from the chamber. Now, when I first got started looking into the BCG operation, this was the part that confused me the most. And I want to take a very careful look at this step to make sure that no one leaves here as confused as I was at first. When hot gas is funneled into this tiny internal expansion chamber located between the tail of the bolt and the inside walls of the carrier, we see here that the gas starts to, unsurprisingly, expand and it wants to escape, but it has almost nowhere to go, guys. It wants to get out of there. The bolt features small metal gas rings that act as seals to trap this high pressure gas inside of the chamber. As the gas rapidly expands inside the sealed chamber, it tries to push the bolt and carrier apart, not just push the bolt forward. This is the part that always confused me. I was always told that the gas just rotates that bolt, but it's a little bit more complex than that. As the gas expands and pushes the bolt forward, at this exact moment, the bolt is firmly locked into the barrel and physically cannot move. Because the bolt is like a wall, the trap gas exerts an equal and opposite force against the inside of the carrier, physically driving the carrier backwards as the two pieces get pulled apart. This is where the unlocking rotation happens. There is a small piece of metal called the cam pin that connects the bolt to the carrier. The bottom of the cam pin sits securely inside the bolt, while the top pin sticks up into a specifically milled diagonal cutout or slot in the upper receiver of the AR. Because of the equal force on both the bolt and, more importantly, the carrier, the cam pin forces the bolt to unlock the entire BCG, then moves backward. During this, you see these little holes like here and here. These holes are where the excess gas is vented away from the gun and hopefully not in our face. Sorry, you left-handed shooters. That really sucks to be you. Okay, that was a lot, but that was really important to understand, so now we can move on to the next step. With the bolt unlocked, the entire BCG begins to move backward. As we can see with the cutaway upper receiver, the bolt clears the barrel extension and we can see it extracts a spent round. The extractor, a lever under the tension that jumped the rim of the cartridge to grab onto the cartridge itself, and the ejector under spring tension work together to extract a spent round. We'll talk more about how the extractor grabs onto the casing in just a little bit. Once the bolt carrier group begins its rearward travel, the spent casing is held firmly by the extractor until it clears the chamber. At this point, the ejector right here comes into play. The extractor is latched into the rim at the base of the round. As the bolt continues to move back, the ejector pushes the casing off the bolt face, forcefully ejecting it from the rifle. Let's visualize this by using a pin punch to depress the spring-loaded ejector. Once the casing clears the chamber, that ejector kicks out that spent casing once and for all. As the BCG moves backward, it shoves the hammer back, resetting it. It then slows to a halt by the buffer spring, then springs forward, being pushed back by that spring. We're on our way back. On the forward path, the BCG slides along the charging handle. The two bolt lugs at the bottom of the bolt start stripping a fresh round from the magazine, pushing it into the barrel's chamber. The bolt has 7 lugs to match the barrel star chamber, just by the way, so you know that. Once the next round is chambered, the bolt face, the business end of the bolt, finishes driving forward. The cam pin moves due to its recess cut into the upper receiver, and this movement guides the bolt to twist, locking the lugs back into battery. The cycle is ready to start over again when we squeeze the trigger. This is how most AR-15 BCGs function, but there are a few unique variations in how other BCGs operate that, when we're looking around at other BCGs or maybe shopping around for one, and you see them and these terms, you're gonna want to know how these change the function of your BCG, like lightweight bolts, for example. There are options out there to change up the materials that your BCG is made out of to reduce its mass. The standard BCGs are made out of steels like 8620, Carpenter 158, and 9310. If you want to learn more about those specific materials, I actually did a whole video on those right over here. But the one thing to know is that the most high quality standard carriers are made of is 8620 steel because it's case hardened. Well, this means that the outside is rock hard to resist wear, but the inner core is soft and more flexible, allowing it to absorb the violent impacts of the gas system and the buffer without cracking or shattering. The bolt itself is usually made from an incredibly tough Carpenter 158 or 9310 steel, so it can safely contain the 55,000 PSI explosion in the chamber over and over again. Bolts like the JP or the Rise Armament low mass BCG have cuts in the BCG and remove that removable weight that may or may not exist in the back to reduce its mass. But why would you want to reduce the mass in the first place? If you swap a steel BCG for an aluminum or a titanium one or a heavily skeletonized one like the JP, for example, you drastically reduce the weight of the moving parts. But what does this do? Well, Greg, I'm glad you asked, buddy, because there is less mass for the expanding gas to push against. The cycling rate speeds up significantly, allowing for faster follow-up shots and less felt recoil, something my competition buddies are huge fans of. So this sounds perfect, right? I mean, why not just get these every single time, no questions asked? Well, the downside to this fast, low-mass cycling usually requires to manually tune your gas block and buffer spring, or the buffer itself, so the rifle doesn't cycle too fast and malfunction. This means getting things like an adjustable gas block or playing with your buffer and spring combo to make sure everything is working perfectly. Once you get it tuned in just right one day at the range, then the temperature or the ambient pressure could change, throwing your gun all out of whack. Trust me guys, I'm speaking from experience here as someone who lives in a state with 100-degree swings from summer to winter. It gets super annoying every time I have to retune my gun every time I go out to an outdoor range. Getting away from all that science stuff, we'll get back to that just real quick. But there are other specialty BCGs that help manage gas. One of my favorites is the CAC downward venting BCG. Instead of those sideways vents that we pointed out earlier, CAC moves those to the bottom of the bolt carrier, venting the gas down towards the magazine well and away from our face in an ideal world. There are also BCGs out there that are adjustable, giving you the ability to adjust the amount of gas that's going in instead of adjusting that gas at the gas block. For some reason, this just makes more sense to me, so I prefer this. But what do you guys think? Do you have any of these fancy BCGs? Definitely let me know down in the comments. I'm always wondering what you guys have and why you have it. Anyway, you now know that the bolt carrier group isn't some magical block of metal. It's a perfect 8-step engine that completes its entire cycle faster than you can blink. But there is a lot more to the BCGs, like coatings, for example. If you upgrade from the standard phosphate coating to a nitride, nickel boron, or even a PVD/DCL coating, that is going to change how easily the BCG feels as it goes through the 8-step process. But why is that exactly? To find out, I'm going to walk you through why you would want to upgrade that mil-spec phosphate bolt and talk about the different material options that there are, as well as coatings and other options that are out there in this video right here. And it's all about cheap versus expensive BCGs. So if you want to learn even more about these things, then I'll catch you over there. Sorry, too much blackness. Too much blackness for our audience. They wouldn't get it.